Yes, so. Float to the floor. Keep them in the back of my car. All right, we all set? Everybody ready? Guys good in the back? All right, thanks, Bob. That's Bob Monahan. He's president of the greater, oh, wait, Bob starts. That's right. Where is it? There you go. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, I'm up. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, honored guests. What a great day this is. My name is Bob Monahan, and I have lived in the 104 for 44 years. Over that time, I have seen the many changes that have taken place within the 104, one of the larger precincts geographically in Queens. Back in the day, kids would hang out in certain spots in large numbers, and we had a conditions car that would go around and break up the groups, sometimes issuing summonses for those who were a little less cooperative. They didn't really know the kids, they just moved them along because of the complaints from the community. Today we are on the threshold of the NCO, Neighborhood Coordination Offices, neighborhood policing, where officers will have the time to speak with the kids, get engaged, and offer solutions and alternatives to just hanging out. Commissioner, if I heard you correctly in your TEDx talk in California, the NCO is a response to people feeling like things were done to them. Instead, the NCO will have people feel like things are done with them. As president of the Greater Ridgewood Youth Council, I have spent nearly 4 decades trying to develop and build those alternatives and solutions. The mission of the GLYC is to improve the quality of life for kids and families throughout Queens. And that mission mirrors that of the NYPD, allowing us to work hand in hand with some of the finest human beings on this planet, the men and women in uniform, right here and across the street, the team of officers at the 104 precinct. But let me say this, we cannot improve the quality of life without continuing to build bridges between the police and the community, building a city where you know your local police officer by name, and you know who to call when you or a neighbor needs assistance. That's the world the GLYC strives to create and build for the 3,200 children and families that we serve every single day in partnership with the NYPD, especially the NCO. There was a motto at the New York City Police Athletic League that said, if you want to change the world, you have to start small. So following that credo, neighborhood coordination officers, Sergeant Ryman, Police Officer Santos and Oliva, came to meet our pre-K students at the GLYC. Our 4-year-olds were totally engaged, and it was a sight to behold. Plans are already in place to have all NCOs visit with our elementary and intermediate school students at the GLYC's 16 after-school programs within the 104th precinct. Commissioner O'Neill, the 104 is hitting the ground running to build the safest city in America for kids to grow in. The reason for that are guys like Tommy Bell, his partner Edie Balika, and used to be Captain Mastronardi. I'm glad that it's Inspector Mastronardi. And Chief Holmes, guiding us with an unmatched commitment to serve, committed to the belief that there is no time to waste in making that happen. I think at this time I'm going to say...
This is where I say thank you, Bob.
Honored guest, I'm privileged to introduce the
thanks
Commissioner of the City of New York, but here we are. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. First, I'd like to thank the YMCA for hosting us here today. Lavina Francis, thank you, Lavina. Also like to recognize the fact that Borough President Melinda Katz is here and City Council Member Robert Holden. Thanks for joining us today. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. In a moment, you're going to hear from Chief of Department Terry Monahan. He'll go into detail about neighborhood policing as our final precinct, Midtown North of Manhattan, adopts this new operational strategy this week. First, I'd like to acknowledge the NCOs, the Neighborhood Coordination Office here in the 104 precinct. Thank you for being here. These cops have been in their new roles for about a month now. They're great examples of the hard work and dedication our men and women in uniform are doing all throughout this city. So thanks, Sarge. Thank you, officers, for everything you do each day. Just while we're talking about neighborhood policing, and we are always talking about better ways to build trust and strengthen relationships throughout the 5 boroughs, I want to speak about something that's as important as anything we do in the NYPD. 30 years ago, this past February 26th, police officer Eddie Byrne was on duty in uniform sitting in a marked police car about 5.5 miles from here in South Jamaica, Queens. Eddie was a cop at a time when drugs were rampant and violence was rampant also throughout the city. And Eddie's job early that morning was to watch over and keep safe a local resident, a Guyanese immigrant who agreed to testify against drug dealers terrorizing his neighborhood. In retaliation, gang members firebombed the man's house twice and repeatedly threatened his life. Officer Byrne was doing his job in the middle of the night when he was brutally assassinated. One man knocked on Eddie's passenger side door, making him turn to look. A second man on the driver's side then coldly and methodically shot Eddie 5 times in the head. 2 other men acted as lookouts, watching nearby. All 4 were caught within a week, and one, in a videotaped confession played at trial, provided graphic details of the murder and told of the bragging the killers did afterwards. Eddie's life was callously taken away solely because of what he represented, for the blue uniform he was wearing and for the responsibility that he embraced. The killers were convicted and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Now they're up for parole. Every 2 years at their state parole hearings, the NYPD's former Deputy Commissioner for Legal Matters, Larry Byrne, Eddie's older brother, gives a victim impact statement to remind the parole commissioners of the depravity shown by his brother's killers. Members of the PBA, Eddie's union, are also vocal opponents of their release. And as NYPD Commissioner, I write letters to the parole board condemning every single cop killer approaching the next parole hearing. But despite our efforts, New Yorkers have reason to be worried that these calculating murderers, these criminals who intentionally targeted public servants whose sole function in society is to fight crime and keep people safe, might actually be released, as unconscionable as that seems. Earlier this year in April, the parole board saw fit to release another brazen cop killer, Herman Bell. Bell is one of the 2 premeditated assassins of NYPD police officers Waverly Jones and Joseph Piagentini in 1971. Bell's partner, Anthony Bottom, is expected to face the parole commissioners next month. In voting to free Bell, the commissioners cited what they called an exemplary prison record, the college degrees he earned inside, and his advancing age. I wonder what great things Officer Jones and Piagentini would have accomplished if they were still alive today. What about Eddie Byrne, who was targeted and murdered just 5 days after his 22nd birthday? In releasing Bell, the parole commissioners said they followed the spirit of the guidelines instituted by the governor in 2011, which say that an inmate's rehabilitation should be considered regardless of the crime he or she was convicted of. Make no mistakes, all murders are reprehensible, but the premeditated, intentional assassination of a police officer is an abhorrent act for which there is no rehabilitation. There is no forgiveness for that. Hate has real and lasting consequences. There should be no second chance for the killer because there certainly isn't one for the fallen cop. The parole board failed grievously in its decision to release an unrepentant Herman Bell, but it can try to make amends now as it decides the fate of those who murdered hero cop Eddie Byrne. I'll bring him back again to Eddie's function that night. He was protecting a witness in a drug dealing case. He was assigned to that spot at the corner of 107th Avenue and Inwood Street in direct response to community complaints and concerns. Our neighborhood policing philosophy means that we are forging deeper connections with all the people we serve in every community. By building trust and strengthening relationships, NYPD cops and those who live and work together in our neighborhoods are working together to address quality of life concerns early and to try to stop violence and disorder from occurring. We're doing that in large part by way of a laser-like focus on the small percentage of criminals in our city who are responsible for driving that violence. It all comes back to relationships, cooperation, and trust. By midweek, neighborhood policing will be operating in all of our residential precincts. It's already guiding half of our patrol and investigation efforts in half of our transit districts. We've already launched it in some of our schools in the Bronx. The message is public safety is a shared responsibility. It's that credo, that understanding, that's guiding our evolution. It's how we continue to push crime down past already record lows. Today's announcement does not mark the end of an effort that began nearly 3.5 years ago. In fact, it marks a new beginning. Been a cop for almost 36 years now, and since the day I started, I've loved this job. I can tell you in 2018, this is where we need to be as a police department, and this is where we need to be as a city of 8.6 million New Yorkers. This is how we are going to make our way forward together. Terry?
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. We announced the switch to neighborhood policing back in May of 2015, and we took our time rolling it out because we wanted to make sure that we were doing it right. It is an entirely new way of policing, designed to bring the community closer to the cops, building trust and fighting crime more effectively. This vision will become a reality in every patrol precinct by next week. We are adding the last 2 neighborhood policing commands this week. Today at the 104 precinct, we're rolling it out in a meeting later tonight where the community is going to get to know these great cops sitting behind me on that one-to-one basis, the neighborhood coordination officers and also the steady sector police officers. And tomorrow night will be the last rollout in Midtown North Precinct. This means that we will have our new philosophy operating in 76 of our patrol precincts, 9 of our housing areas, and by early next year in all of our transit districts. And we've begun to roll it out throughout our school system. We are in the Bronx now, and by the end of the school year, we hope to have it operating through our school safety offices throughout every school district in the city. New York City has constantly been the safest big city in America. By utilizing this philosophy, this isn't just a couple of cops, this is all 55,000 members of the NYPD working together under this philosophy. With neighborhood policing, we are making progress in the city. The declines that we are seeing over the past 3 years is nothing short of astounding. If you look at total crime in the last 3 years in the city, down 8%, murder down 16.2%, shootings down an incredible 34.9% over the last 3 years. All of this accomplished while making 26% less arrests. The men and women of the NYPD have been driving down crime for decades. But with neighborhood policing, the community has joined our team and is helping us to solve crimes. No matter where you live in New York City, your cops are working in the same areas, patrolling the same streets each and every day, getting to know the residents, the local leaders, and the clergy. This consistency has resulted in new relationships, increased trust, and over time, shared information. We've given our cops discretion, and we want them to be innovative, working together with their communities to solve problems. Cops and communities working together in the name of a shared responsibility, and we're just getting started. I want to thank the men and women who wear this uniform for all of their hard work. Your effort is paying off in a very big way. And to all New Yorkers, continue to get to know your cops. We all have the same goal, to improve the quality of life in New York City. I have no doubt that together we will continue to see historic results, driving down crime even further, making America's safest big city even safer. Thank you, and now it's my honor to introduce the great Borough of Queens President, Melinda Katz.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank Commissioner O'Neill and welcome him back to the Borough of Queens. He is no stranger here and comes out quite often. So I want to thank him for that. I also want to thank Bob Monahan. He runs a great group. I know he sort of fluffed over that. His group is amazing. The Greater Ridgewood Youth Council is just a remarkable organization, and we want to thank them for the generations of families that they have helped. And, you know, I wanted to be here today for a few reasons, but first of all, the pilot project for neighborhood policing. 2 of the precincts happened to be right here in the Borough of Queens. This started as a pilot project with 4 precincts in the city of New York. 100th and the 101st precincts were part of those 4. And so I'm excited by the fact that it was successful there and that the police department chose to grow it. And as neighborhood policing has been gradually introduced throughout the city, we're seeing that this model is helping to fuel the continued reduction of crime citywide. And neighborhood policing enables, look, the cops to become part of the community and the quality of life issues to be known to them and make sure that the sector cops have the information they need to do their job in the individual communities every single day. And that is, I believe, most important here in the borough of Queens, where you know we have 190 countries and 200 languages. Those that have heard me speak can't help but miss that fact, that we have all those languages spoken here. And we are a borough of neighborhoods. We still say we're from Arverne, New York. We're from Ridgewood, New York. We're from Jamaica, New York. We don't say Queens on our return label. And we do that because we believe in our distinctive neighborhoods, and we pride ourselves that every community has its own individual likes, dislikes, and issues and families. So I believe in neighborhood policing. It's one of the things that there's been a drumbeat for many, many years now back in the police force, and Commissioner O'Neill and his team did bring it back to the city of New York. So I want to thank the mayor, Mayor de Blasio. By the way, he has Queens Week. City Hall in Queens is happening right now. So not only do we have this event, but tomorrow he'll be in Corona at Elm Corps, and Wednesday night at a town hall meeting in Arverne. But I want to thank him and the commissioner for taking neighborhood policing so seriously, especially in a borough that prides itself on the fact that every neighborhood is different, and we love that. And we need our police officers to get to know them, understand us, and work with us. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, thanks, Melinda. We're going to take some on-topic questions now. Tony.
The community police has been in existence for, as the Chief mentioned, for about 3.5 years or so. The crime declines have been fairly steady in that period, but some criminologists we've spoken to have said that it's really difficult to measure the other component of community policing, and that is the building of trust between the cops and community. Have you given any thought to how to measure that and quantify that going forward? And if indeed you can quantify that?
Yeah, and we have to do it more than anecdotally, obviously. I mean, we've done it internally. There's three things I'm concerned about here: cops, crime, and community. Internally, what we've done with the research with the police officers, the surveys we've done have greatly increased since the initial surveys back in April of 2014 as far as trust and respect for the executives and the supervisors within the NYPD. With the community, we have the sentiment meter. We still don't have, that is not, it's still in beta testing here. We're just trying to figure out what numbers make that move before we make it fully operational. And we do have an RFP out there where we're looking for a company to come in and do an overall evaluation of how neighborhood policing is working. I mean, the crime numbers are there. The violence numbers are, we're down in shootings 34.9% since it started. And that's with the rest being down 26.2%. Overall crime is down 8.3%. So those are the real numbers that we need to constantly talk about, because when Terry, Carlos Gomez, and I, and Nair Rodney started to talk about neighborhood policing, what did we say it was? It's a crime-fighting model of policing, and that's what we get paid to do. I think that's the real numbers that we talk about, but there's also so many other things that we have to make sure we can quantify going forward. Yes.
When you talk about rolling this out, what does the initiation here look like, and how long is the training process in a usual sense?
Terry, you want to take that? Or Rodney?
Okay, do you want to?
Sure. So, perfect example, we're doing a rollout tonight right here in the 104 with these phenomenal selected officers, these neighborhood coordination officers. So one of the things we do is we promote an attendance from the residents here in Ridgewood and ask them to come out and get an opportunity to meet that police officer that's going to be assigned to them, that's going to help them, that's going to work together, that's going to gather a way to figure out how to solve problems. So that's the first thing going forward, and it's paying off. We're seeing a lot of people gravitate to having a cop that they can call up and being able to express concerns to that specific officer that's going to work in that area to make sure they address any concerns that come up in the future.
Something about the mindset that you try to instill in them in their interactions with the community?
Yeah, so each neighborhood coordination officer gets a specific training. One of the trainings that they get is criminal investigation course. It's a training that all New York City detectives get, and without sounding self-absorbed, I apologize. New York City detectives are the best detectives in the world. And for the neighborhood coordination officers to get that same training to be able to investigate a crime that occurs in their localized area, I think makes them successful. They also get other types of what's called NCO training, which makes them a little bit more of a well-rounded cop. Everything from community relations to public speaking to being able to solve a problem and work with other agencies, and as well as there's a CIT training or a mediation training, excuse me, where they're able to, instead of always resulting in making an arrest or issuing a summons, they're working with the parties to figure out a way to how to mediate the situation in advance from reoccurring.
And one of the other things that they get involved in is build-the-block meetings. These cops, without their supervisors, without us sitting up here going to the meetings, they're going to run their meeting with the community one-on-one and deal with the residents and work together on solving problems.
Tony?
Follow-up, you mentioned the sentiment meter, and I keep asking this question.
You do.
When are we going to see some results? I know you internally you've been sharing them with certain commanders, but when are we going to see some results of those surveys?
So the issue here is, and we're working with the vendor on this, there's numbers that we get from the sentiment meter, and we just, before we incorporate this into ComStat, before we operationalize it, we want to see what makes those numbers go up and down. This way, when we bring it into ComStat, we can give the precinct commanders, give them an idea of what makes those numbers go up and down. I mean, this is, again, it's in beta. You know, I've seen it. Terry's seen it. I'm a believer in it, but before we go full speed ahead, we have to make sure that we know what makes those numbers go up and down. And when we figure that, when we find that out, when we know exactly what makes those numbers go up and down, we can devise specific strategies to make sure that we continue to build trust with the community. I suppose you'll be answering that, you'll be asking that question again next week at our crime briefing. Okay. Zolan.
You mentioned an RFP. Is that connected to the sentiment data, or is that for...
No, it's just overall evaluation of neighborhood policing. We want an independent body to do that.
Companies that you're looking
I have to get back to you on that. I think it actually closes Tuesday. So, yep, I think so. Yep.
Commissioner, the program community policing was used in that name before. How is this program different than one that was used before?
So I was a precinct commander back from 98 to 2000, almost 2005. Terry was also, Rodney, I think he came a little bit later. And we had CPOP cops. And I think the issue with CPOP cops, and they're all good police officers, they got disconnected from their primary function, and that's to fight crime. We stress to all NCOs, your primary mission here is to keep people safe and fight crime. And the way we continue to do that, the way we do that better is to make sure we have a real connection.
And if I could just add, is unlike the CPOP cops in the past, is that CIC training that every detective gets. These cops are getting that same training, and from day one, they're working hand in hand with the detectives, working on crimes within the neighborhoods.
Is the police department continuing a program that was very successful before, Citizens Academy, NYPD Citizens Academy?
Yeah, that continues. Yep. I think, Nilda, you running that? Yeah, okay. Okay. Anything else on topic? All right, I think we're going to reset and do off topic. All right, so thanks everybody for being here. All right. What do we got? Off topic? Yep.
So I just want to get the latest investigation into the homicide.
All right. Chief Shea, Dermot?
Sure. Sunday, the 21st, about 3 in the morning, we received a call at the 2-4 Precinct Station House, an individual inquiring about a business associate. Police officers responded to, at that time, 710 West End Avenue, which is at the corner of 95th Street and West End. Unfortunately, when they went up to the apartment, they found a female, white, 70 years of age, deceased. Autopsy was completed today. The cause of death is a cut to the neck. That's going to be deemed a homicide. There is a person of interest that we, I won't use the word custody, but we have a person of interest in that case. And without getting too much further into details, I won't say. We believe that all the pieces of that puzzle, if you will, are within that building.
Interest, was that person known to the victim?
I'm not going to go further than that. Very early. It's still very early. We have a female person of interest for the case. We're exploring what relationship, if any, were between the two, and it is still pretty preliminary.
Tony?
Person of interest currently, not arrest, but is that person currently talking to detectives?
If I explain to you the answer, you would understand why I'm not talking, but there is a person of interest in that case.
Zolan?
The pieces of the puzzle in the building is the person a neighbor? Did they live in the building?
Yeah, there is a female person of interest that resides in that building.
Were police called to that apartment where she was found previously in other instances, like domestic incidents, for instance, anything like that?
Not to my knowledge.
Yep.
Body cameras. Can you give us a status? Stuff has been pulled. Where's that at?
Yeah, okay. Commissioner Tucker will start to talk about that, and Jess, you'll fill in the details.
So, as you all know, Saturday evening, just in the 4 to 12 tour, we had one of our officers turning out at the 121 precinct, and when he retrieved his body-worn camera from the docking station, and he was waiting for his partner so he can go out on patrol, he took his camera off, he put it on, took it off, turned it on, and when he turned it on, he noticed smoke coming from the bottom of the camera, in which case he put the camera down, correctly so, and subsequently the camera, within minutes, exploded. And as a result of that, and since that time, we pulled all of those cameras. This was the L5 camera. It's different from the L4s that we began to roll out initially. The L5s it wasn't clear to us that they had any serious problems, although we were aware of a situation, and Commissioner Tisch can speak to that in more detail. Nevertheless, we have since then, with all deliberate speed, been thinking about and thinking how we're going to bring these cameras, figure out, first of all, what went on with the camera, why it exploded, number one. Number two, having conversations with the manufacturer or with Exxon, the company that now owns ViewView, the company from whom we initially did business with to begin the camera program. So we'll talk more about that as well. In any case, we'll give you some details about where we are now and where we're going. We've since taken the cameras offline. The 18 precincts, 18 commands have been impacted by this, and we're talking about 2,990 cameras all told. We want to figure out how we can get this back on track as quickly as possible. But there are some challenges in that respect, and so we'll walk you through what those challenges are, and then we'll take some questions if we haven't answered them all for you at that time. I ask Commissioner Tisch to pick it up here and talk about the details with respect to the issues around what we are doing to get a handle on where we are with the device. Yes.
So right now, we spent most of the day yesterday triaging the incident, alerting the officers who had the affected cameras, not to use them, to bring them back to the commands, and getting those cameras physically out of the commands. And today begins the work of figuring out what our path forward is going to be. So we had planned until yesterday to continue to roll out the LE5 model as part of our deployment. We had said that we were going to give a body camera to every police officer, sergeant, and lieutenant in every patrol, transit, and housing numbered command by the end of the calendar year, and we were well on our way to doing that. As I said before, unfortunately, that involved rolling out the LE5 camera. And so right now we have an inventory problem, is the best way I can describe it. We're obviously not going to continue to roll out the LE5. We have hired, or we're in the process of hiring, an independent forensic investigator to do an analysis of the affected camera, and we are eager to see the results of that analysis. But sitting here today, officer safety is obviously our primary concern, and so we are not exploring continuing the rollout of LE5 cameras at this time. We're looking at two different options. The first option involves continuing to roll out the older LE4 camera, which have been pretty sturdy. They've held up well. We have about 12,710 of them operating throughout the city in all 5 boroughs. The issue there is, as I said, an inventory one. Those are not manufactured, so the question will be, can Axon spin up a manufacturing line to produce more inventory for us? The other option that we're exploring at the same time, as many of you know, as chance would have it, Axon in May acquired VIEVU. So we're also looking at rolling out the Axon Body Camera 2, we call it the AB2. There are a lot of complexities associated with that, not least of which is managing a hybrid environment where some officers are using the VIEVU evidence management platform and other officers would be using evidence.com. There are practical administrative issues associated with that. There's also technical issues about how we would set up the commands that have the Axon body cameras. But this is, for sure, our top priority is trying to get this program back on its feet, up and running, and aggressively moving forward. I understand, we understand that rolling out the body cameras is a big part of the agency's commitment to building trust with the community. And right now, sorting through all of this and developing a go-forward strategy that I can brief you on soon is our top priority.
Yep. Ashley?
I wanted to ask, the problems with video cameras had surfaced from other jurisdictions before the police department adopted its contract with that company. And so looking at this incident, I'm wondering, and the complexities that it raises for you, I'm wondering if you have any kind of second thoughts about your choice, and if the battery ignition issue that you cited yesterday was known to other departments that you worked with.
Sure. So I can handle that. Let me first describe how the city's procurement rules work and how our procurement of the VIEVU solution initially worked back in 2016, 2017. So when we want to spend money with a vendor, we issue an RFP that is governed by what's called the Procurement Policy Board rules. Those rules basically have the agency, and they apply to all agencies, have the agencies evaluate proposals based on 2 factors, the technical proposal and the price proposal. To do a procurement like the one we contemplated with body cameras, we knew it was a very important procurement. We assembled a team of 9 members of the service, uniform and civilian, to evaluate the proposals we received. I should note, from 28 different companies, we received 55 different proposals. They evaluated the technical proposals that they received, and based on those technical scores, they whittled it down to the top 2. Those 2 were VIEVU and Axon. On the technical scores, based on the committee's evaluations, VIEVU and Axon received very similar technical scores. And so then, after they were surfaced as the top two, we opened the pricing proposals. There, Axon's price was 1/3 the price offered, VIEVU's price was 1/3 the price offered by Axon. VIEVU's price was $6.4 million for 5,000 cameras over 5 years. Axon's was $17.2 million for 5,000 cameras over 5 years. The frustrating part for us in all of this was that the cost driver with body cameras is not the camera itself. It's the data storage. And both companies proposed virtually identical data storage solutions, but at vastly different prices. And so what was driving the price was not Axon's camera has this feature or that feature. It was what they were charging us to store all of the video that we were collecting. Now, to give you a sense of scale, you should keep in mind, we recently recorded our 1 millionth body camera video. Body cameras are just as important as the camera is the evidence management solution that you use to store and house all of the data and all of the cameras that we collect. So the NYPD, based on the technical scores from the proposals that we received, plus the pricing based on the formula for how you evaluate these bids, it was VIEVU. It was clear based on the Procurement Policy Board rules that that was the vendor that we had to go with.
But at any point, were there concerns over the technical issues that had arisen in other places? And when you say your 1 millionth video, how much data are we talking about that the NYPD has?
I'm going to get back to you on the actual amount of data that we store, but I believe it's in the petabytes. It's a lot of data. As part of the evaluation process, we did track down many of the other local law enforcement agencies that had reported issues with the VIEVU cameras. They were reporting issues with a different, a lower version than the LE4, the camera that we were going to be rolled out, but we did do a thorough investigation into it. I want to point out one other thing, which I think will be important just to get a full sense of the issue we're dealing with right now. We started rolling out the LE5 cameras this August. That is when we ran out of inventory of our LE4s, except for the ones we're keeping as spares in case a camera breaks in a command. In June, we were made aware of an incendiary incident associated with an LE5 camera in another law enforcement agency that was already using those cameras. We asked Axon at the time to investigate the issue. We required that they hire a independent forensic investigator to look into it. They came back to us with their findings at the end of July, and they told us at that time that they believed there were no safety issues, no product defects associated with the LE5 camera, and that the issue that caused the incendiary incident in this other law enforcement agency was caused, they believed, by tampering with the camera, which resulted in puncture of the lithium-ion battery. And so that was the one incident that we had heard of that involved basically cameras igniting, and we got a clean bill of health from Axon on that camera. We also had Axon check with the manufacturing line, make sure that all quality assurances were in place. And we also performed our own testing to give you a sense of it. We dropped it from 6 feet. We dropped them from 10 feet. We had a car run over a camera. And we saw absolutely no signs of any of these cameras igniting in all of our testing. But based on the fact that we had an incendiary incident and that we had heard of another law enforcement agency having a similar incident, we don't feel comfortable at this time moving forward with the LE5, which is what's going to drive our schedule.
And so, it sounds like, though, unfortunate thing is that it sounds like you all allowed Taser to investigate its own product rather than conducting a truly independent investigation. And also, was there a culture associated with this, with the camera incident?
Let me just jump in for a second. There's a couple things going on right now. So, first, we're looking, is this a single camera issue? Is it this one device that there's a problem with it? Or is it a manufacturer's defect? You know, there could be other factors involved. As Jess said, we don't know how the camera was handled. That's part of the investigation. And we're not doing this investigation ourselves. We hired an independent forensic investigator to take a look at this camera to see what the issues were and see what kind of conditions it is and why this thing ignited. And we're not going to go back to LE5s until we get an answer to that. Maybe there is no answer. Maybe we have to move on to a different product.
So, can you identify the jurisdiction which had the issue? And right now, with withdrawal of the LE5s, are those cops who had them essentially naked in terms of the cameras?
So I'd be more comfortable if you asked Axon about the other law enforcement agency. And in terms of the cops that had the LE5s, yes, they do not have cameras at this time. The only cameras that are out there are the LE4s, and they are being operated according to the patrol guide, normal standard use.
So there are over 12,000 LE4s out there, and we're looking to figure out how we're going to proceed. Remember, this only happened on early Sunday morning, late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. How about moving forward to re-equip those 2,990 cops with body-worn cameras? Yep, Zolan.
When did you start rolling out the LE5s? Was it before the incident?
No. We started rolling out the LE5s at the end of August.
The investigation with Axon.
Correct.
After they gave you the clear.
Exactly. In fact, we delayed our rollout of the LE5 until we got the answer to that question.
And do you know yet when you're going to be able, do you know now a new deadline for the rollout?
I sure wish I did. It's what we're working full steam ahead on right now, and I hope to have more information to report soon.
Yep.
So is there a scenario where the LE5 will still get used? Where they'll be part of the rollout again?
I mean, if the independent forensic investigator comes back and says it's a problem with this single camera, that I'm not, maybe it was dropped, maybe it was damaged in some way, intentionally or unintentionally, then there's a possibility we have to rethink using LE5s again if there's no issue, if there's no manufacturer's defect. Yep.
What happened to the footage that may have been on the camera that exploded? Did it just get erased, or are you guys able to, go back and retrieve it?
I think it was upon the police officer turning it out, so it probably wasn't anything on that camera, but that's going to be part of the investigation.
Is that something that you could retrieve in the event, another camera exploded?
That's up to the investigators. I don't know what kind of condition it's in.
Clarify, so the officers aren't using any body cameras at the moment until you guys figure out.
Say that again? So we have 12,000 cameras out there, the LE5s. Those are the first generation, LE4s. That's the first generation. The 2,990 that were using the LE5s, they're not equipped with cameras now.
So they're just not going to be using body cameras until you guys figure out what to do.
Exactly. And that's what we're doing right now. Anybody else on this side? Yep.
In the actual incident, the explosion incident, would you characterize it as sort of just catching on fire? Was there an actual force and the thing blew apart? What was the actual incident?
I have it.
Yep. You got it, yes.
So what I have here, the officer clipped the camera to his chest and powered the camera on. Within 15 seconds, the officer noticed smoke exiting from the bottom USB port, as Commissioner Tucker said, which is used for charging and uploading data. The officer removed the camera from his shirt and placed it on a metal post in the rear parking lot of the precinct. Approximately 5 seconds later, the camera ignited and fell off the bollard post onto the ground, where it flamed for approximately 60 seconds until it burned out.
Last question on this topic, please.
On the topic. What backup visual devices are used now that body cameras can't be used right now? I know one of the vehicles, I think, have cameras. Are they still going to be used?
Yeah, Highway has vehicle cameras. So what we're working on right now is a solution to what you just presented, to re-equip our 2,990 police officers with body-worn cameras. We still have over 12,000 cameras out there. Zolan?
Sorry, do you currently have so if one option is to, have the LE4s and then go and use Axon's cameras as well, right?
Yep.
Do you currently have an infrastructure in place to support storage for 2 different cameras?
The storage won't be the issue. The issue will be the evidence management platform that we put on top of it.
But that infrastructure's not in place.
The evidence management system for the Axon cameras is not in place. I mean, we're beta testing it now, and you can bet we're working very hard to build that out. But the back-end storage part would be very similar to what exists today. That won't drive the timeline.
Who's paying for this investigation, the city or Axon?
Because we want an independent investigator, we made the decision for the NYPD to hire the investigator, but I want to be very clear that those, as far as I can think, are the only costs that the New York City will bear related to this event. We are not going to pay to replace the 2,990 cameras or to retrofit the precincts should we decide to move to the AB2 camera in the future. I don't have any TA yet.
Yep. Looking for clarification, the robbery suspect, the would-be alleged robbery suspect who was shot and killed by the deli owner in the Bronx, was that suspect armed?
Yeah, so last night in the 43rd Precinct at about 22:30 hours, the J Market, 1260 Morrison Avenue, we have an individual that comes into the store, takes money off the counter. He later returns to the store a couple hours later. Very early in the investigation, but we believe at this point what happens is he announces a robbery, jumps over the counter, and in the process of jumping over the counter is when he was shot by the store owner with the license 357. Everything else beyond that, I'm not going to comment on.
So not sure if he was armed, knife, gun?
I'm not going to get into what the store owner believed at this point. No weapon has been recovered.
But Chief, the Proud Boy roundup, what are the numbers now, and how's that investigation going?
Yep, so in approximately 9 days, I guess, since the prior Friday, I'll start with the initial incident. That initial night, we had the 3 arrests for the robbery. Starting last Friday, we grabbed an additional 2 individuals. One turned himself in, one was apprehended. An additional 3 people turned themselves in today, so that makes a total under arrest thus far of 8. I would anticipate additional arrests.
In the back.
Can you give us any details on Urban Antillon, who was involved in the Proud Boys incident?
Say that again.
Urban Antillon, do you have any details on his arrest at all?
Yeah, I believe he was one of, and we can follow up with you, I believe he was one of the 3 that turned themselves in today. And there's a variety of charges. So not every individual is facing the same charges. It depends what was captured on video. Some have elevated charges. But to summarize, it's essentially attempted assault and riot. Some of the individuals faced slightly higher, for example, attempted assault 3 versus attempted assault 1 or 2.
Is the police department investigating the Proud Boys as a gang, and particularly are you looking at any of Mr. McGinnis's actions?
Yeah, so what I'll say is that what we're investigating is the incidents that took place that night, the crimes that were captured on video, the individuals that were beaten. We've received a lot of cooperation from the community. As I said, we've already effected 8 arrests. I would anticipate more. We'll be updating our Crime Stoppers and Twitter page this evening with who has been apprehended thus far and who we still need to identify.
Them as a gang?
Our Intelligence Bureau, we do look at hate groups that are operating in New York City and beyond. It just is, I think Mr. McGinnis made a statement that he had, I guess, associates with the NYPD, and I just want to state right now that that statement is absolutely a flat-out lie, that what the Proud Boys represent is antithetical to what the NYPD represents. So I want to make sure everybody in New York City knows that there is no association with anybody within the NYPD and any hate groups.
Some more guys?
Yep.
Back to the Upper West Side real quick. Was a murder weapon recovered, and if so, where?
No, there was no weapon recovered in the apartment. Beyond that, the investigation is still going on.
In the back.
Chief, the people that have been apprehended since the brawl, are they all members or believed to be members of the Proud Boys group? And did McInnes, he promised he was going to arrange for them to turn themselves in. Was that bluster from him, or did he have any role in that?
So since the initial evening, 2 Friday, 3 today, have been apprehended. I believe 4 have turned themselves in. 1 was apprehended by our warrants division. In terms of, I have no direct knowledge of Gab McInnes aiding in this investigation in any way whatsoever. I can tell you that our members of our Detective Bureau are in contact with attorneys. I would anticipate additional arrests. The 5 that were arrested since the initial night are on the, if you will, the Proud Boys side, but I would anticipate arrests on both sides going forward.
The mayor recently announced, I guess as a result of the right to know law passed just last year, that police officers have to identify themselves as much as having business cards to give to whoever they stop. I know there was a report that 10 million cards were ordered by the police department for that endeavor. Could you explain what that program is and which police officers in the city actually have those cards?
Dan, you want to talk about that? And Prunty's our acting DCLM.
So Right to Know is not a program. It's legislation that was passed by the City Council last year, and it became effective October 19th. So under Right to Know, the officers are obliged, when they make an investigatory stop, when they are at a DWI checkpoint or a roadblock type of stop, or when there's investigatory questioning of witnesses, that officers are required to clearly identify themselves, to also offer a business card, which we have pre-printed business cards, as you pointed out. There are exceptions to that, of course. The cards are not required. I'm sorry, the cards are also required when there are searches of people, property, or vehicles. There's no requirement that the officers provide business cards or offer business cards in the instances where we have screening outside a building, or for example, screening in the subway, because in those events, it would be too tedious if we were handing out business cards to every single person. And often at those events, it's clear to the individuals that their property can be searched.
Thanks, guys. Hold on. Zolan's got one last one. Go ahead. I know Zolan, actually. No. It's one.
Some of the complaints about the police guidance to officers have essentially said that, you know, the police department hasn't made it clear enough to officers when this applies, such as in the subway. It's not clear, you know, the guidance doesn't make clear that, you know, at the entrance before a person swipes in, the officer doesn't have to provide a card, but inside the station, the right to know applies. And so I'm wondering if you feel that you have made it sufficiently clear to officers in what circumstances they have to abide by the Right to Know Act.
Yes, we've done an extensive amount of training on that, and we feel that our training and our guidance to the officers, as well as our policies, is very clear on that.
Thanks, everybody. Hold on.
Together, what's the dollar amount?
We don't have a dollar amount yet because there are going to be 2 parts to it, a non-destructive part, which is the first part, and then a destructive part. The findings of the non-destructive part will tell us how in-depth the destructive part of the investigation or the analysis.
How's that for an answer? All right, it's good.